Okay, welcome back to another episode of the On the Court podcast. Now today is a bit of a different episode than what I've done in the last few episodes. And today I'm just going to give you my predictions this early on into the season of who I think are the leaders in the MVP race, in the Defensive Player of the Year race, and also I'll throw in the rookies as well, even though, I can admit that I'm not too well versed in how well the rookies are going as a whole. But I'll still give it my go and give you my pointers there. So I've got my trusty piece of paper obviously here because I do not want to miss a name, and I've got some notes that I want to talk about. But we'll start first, obviously, with the MVP race, which is the one that most people focus on. It's the one that, in some ways, to me at least, it's the easiest for me to give my opinion on, just with how well versed I am in terms of what goes into the MVP as much as I can. The Defensive Player of the Year is a bit of a harder one for me, and like I said, the rookie thing is something that I'm getting better at, but I'm not going to be able to give my takes as well as I'm going to be able to give it for the MVP race. But yeah, who do I think is the leader right now? Who do I think would win the MVP if they were to give it right now? And the winner is KD. Okay, I know there's a lot of juggling around with KD and Steph. Which one is the MVP right now? And honestly, in some ways, you could do a coin flip and you could kind of decide on that way, just because they both have such a big impact on their team winning and they're putting up great numbers. Okay, historically good numbers compared to what they've done before. So with that considered, you could kind of say that either of them are the MVP right now, especially when both of their teams are up there in the standings. But the reason I'm giving it KD over Steph is just when I watch KD play, I just feel like he can take over and get the team a win a lot more effectively. And I noticed that, and people are going to be like, oh, but it was against the Pistons and all this. I don't buy into that narrative. At the end of the day, if a team, no matter what the record is, if they're playing good against a team and they're making them work for it, if a player comes out on top and shows their worth, they're showing their worth. That's just the reality of the situation. So basically, I noticed it just with the Pistons. And I was like, wait, the Pistons are giving it to the Nets? Like, what is happening here? And obviously, Harden wasn't playing, and you can make arguments that Harden is just not the player this year as he previously has been. But that all considered, you've still got KD and you've still got a talented group around him. Not the most talented around, but still pretty decent. And with that, KD came out on top and dropped to 50p. So things like that, like those kind of games when I watch, KD just takes over at will. That's just the way it seems. Whereas with Steph, despite the fact that, he's a killer on the court, he's going to bring intimidation no matter where he plays, and he's always getting double team, triple team, full team, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't, at this present time right now with the last few games that he's played, has hurt his case for MVP in my eyes just a little bit. And I get that there's a lot of pressure with him, wanting to beat the record and that sort of stuff, and I think that did play a mental game with him. But even then, just now, if I were to do a coin flip, I would prefer to lean towards choosing KD for number one. Now, number two, obviously, would then be Steph, okay? Basically, number one, number two, and I've kind of explained why Steph makes such an impact. But this has probably been said 100 times before, but I want to say it again. The big thing that Steph does for his team that not a lot of other players that are really, really good do is that the way they bring such value to their team is not just through their shooting prowess, not just through their playmaking, not just through their decision making on the court, but Steph actually helps other players around him play better. There's this aura with that team that gets everyone playing at their highest level. You see it with Wiggins, how well he's playing. You're seeing how Poole's kind of hit up the ranks in terms of most improved. Little things like that. But it's the fact that people focus so much on Steph because they know what he can do, that they leave others open, and it just makes the team more valuable as a result, because the team then can capitalize on this and use that to their advantage. But yeah, beyond that, we know why Steph's up in the race there. Like I said, you could put him in number one if you wanted to, but just right now, after this week, I'm putting KD over Steph. Now, who then comes in third place? Okay, who's the third kind of in the MVP ladder, so to speak? And for me, it was honestly, I had to think about this. So I was thinking about what I'm going to talk about today for you guys, and I was putting it all through my head. I was looking at the numbers, I was looking at the stats, I was looking at the team and all their stats and all this sort of stuff, but I had to go with Giannis for number 3. Okay, I just had to go with him. Just the numbers he's putting up, with the efficiency that he's doing it at, and the fact how the Bucks now, I think, have the second best record in the last few games, or at a certain period of time. I think the Suns were the highest, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Just that fact, when he came back, the impact that he had on the game, and just watching him take over games, like unfortunately when they were versus the Lakers, I've mentioned it before, how he just took over and just went at the rim with will. Things like that, it's just, you can't dispute the fact that his numbers are just great, and the impact that that has on the team winning. Okay, and that's the classic case of the MVP. And the thing with MVP is that there's not a definite consensus of, are we choosing MVP on who the best player in the world right now is? Because in the past, there would have been other winners, surely. Okay, I can tell, just looking at that back at the years, there would have been other winners if we were to really go on who is, in a nutshell, the best player on the planet. But then there's the other case where MVP is like, is it based on the record for the team? Does the team have to be in a very strong winning case for it to be for the MVP to be won? And that's where there's some differentiation, but I'm going to just go based on how it has traditionally gone with. So team record matters, and because of that, I couldn't give to Jokic because the Nuggets are, even though despite the fact they're so good comparably when he's on the court versus when he's not on the court, it's just hard for me to give it, considering that his record is on the lower side and Giannis's is up there. It's just the case what it may be. But Giannis, honestly, this year, he's always been a great defensive threat. Like, you know, that's not to be disputed, as well as an offensive threat. But he's just becoming a lot more of a rounded player when I'm watching him play. He's making more assists. He's getting the team more involved. And honestly, he's shooting better as well this year. So, well, you know, overall, I have to look at the specific numbers. I'll be honest, I didn't look at the specific percentages compared to previous years. But just when I was watching him, he's more confident. His free throw routine has changed. There's no more of that counting. So in the playoffs, we don't have to worry about all that 10, 9, you know, all that. You know what I'm talking about. So with Giannis, I had to give it to him for third place. But he's up there. He just demands respect every year, year in, year out. And he's such a likable guy that even though I've never disliked Giannis, don't get me wrong. But honestly, even in the earlier years, like just the last couple of years, when he's been dominant, I haven't really been focusing on too much. Like, yeah, you know, Giannis does his thing. But honestly, like he's made a fan out of me. He's just funny. He's just a great guy. But I know that doesn't go into the MVP. Don't get me wrong, I know that. But yeah, big numbers, contribution to the team. You can't go wrong. Okay, but like I said, Jokic is up there. If only the team record was higher. Just looking at his PER this year, like it's ridiculous. The impact that he has when he's playing, how well he plays, you know, in considering the whole team, like how well he plays and controls the tempo, controls the moving of the ball, controls the offense, and honestly, a very underrated defensive player now, if I were to say so myself. So that's like the MVP, okay? So KD number 1, Steph number 2, number 3 is Giannis, but Jokic is just knocking on that door, okay? Knocking on that door, waiting to get in potentially, depending on how the Nuggets go. But honestly, Nuggets have not had the best of luck when it comes to injuries and all this sort of stuff, so we've got to give them a break a bit, but that's just my MVPs. Now let's get into Defensive Player of the Year. Now again, this is one that's harder for me to measure. And over the years when I've looked at this and really thought about this, it's one where I've had to really think a lot more because there's so many things to consider. Are we talking defensively as in someone who's just blocking a bunch of shots? Are we talking someone who's just a killer on the boards? Are we talking about someone who steals and causes deflections and turnovers and that sort of stuff? Like, there's so many different factors that you've got to consider. And I get that in MVP, you've got to consider different factors. But it's a little more easier because it's all together. You can consider the player encompassing everything, more or less. Whereas with Defensive Player of the Year, you've got to look at their impact on the defensive rating on the team. You've got to consider their own defensive efficiency and all this sort of stuff. And because of that, and all things considered, and the fact that I believe it should be used against the same standard as MVP, as in your team record should matter, you can't go past Draymond Green. You just can't. Okay, and I know he's up there with a lot of people, and for me as well. Okay, Draymond Green is so versatile as a defender. He's just so versatile as a defender. He can defend 1 to 5. His team record right now for defensive efficiency is number 1. So Golden State is right up there. Now they're under 100 possessions, so they're the only team under that. So you can't dispute that. And just watching the impact that he has in games, like I was watching the Warriors versus the Pacers earlier, and just it wasn't the greatest game from the Warriors' perspective, but even then you just see how Draymond Green can do just the little things right. Okay, he just does all the little things right, and then he can also do some of the big things right as well when need to. But he just his defensive presence, the way he can move around, the way he can guard all 1 to 5. You can't go beyond the impact that Draymond Green's had this year. So in my eyes, he's right up there for Defensive Player of the Year right now, and there's no one really that close in my opinion. Okay. You can send me a message if you disagree. You can let me know what you think. Yeah, you go to Twitter and just at me if you want. I don't really care. But for me, Defensive Player of the Year right now, Draymond Green. No ifs and buts from my end. Now, number 2, that's the one I really had to think about, and I gave it to Caruso. It's a weird choice, but just looking at his defensive presence and what he's brought to the Chicago Bulls right now, you can't dispute that he's a defensive threat. Like, you just can't. He's leading it in steals and deflections. He's disrupting the offense when he's playing. He's leading the Chicago Bulls in terms of the identity on the court when it comes to defensive edge alongside Lonzo. But just what he's brought to Chicago, that defensive mindset, has really resonated with the team, and it's obviously helped them play well. Chicago Bulls right now, very unfortunate situation. Let's hope that can all be rectified as soon as possible. They can get back to playing the great basketball they are playing. But you can't dispute the fact that Caruso has made an impact on the defensive edge of that team. And that's why I'm going to put him up second. Like I said, between 1 and 2 for this one is a lot more than the one for MVP. But I'm going to go with Caruso for number 2. Now, number 3 is I went with Miles Turner. At the end of the day, people are going to argue with me and go, yeah, but Gobert should be up there. I'm just not a fan of Gobert. I think he's overrated as a defender, and a few players have made this comment, and recently, in fact, one of the players who I'm really liking it, Ant's comments regarding this as well. I just feel like, first of all, there's a bit of fatigue there in terms of decision. Like, how many times are we going to give it to this guy who's, doing all this stuff, but in my opinion, is overrated as a defender as a whole. I'm not saying he's a bad defender. He's a great defender, but just always pushing this narrative that he's just solely the best. I don't see it. But yeah, at the end of the day, he's always going to be coming up in discussions, but I didn't give it to him for number 3. I gave it to Miles Turner, leading the league in blocks, just a defensive presence, kind of a 3-and-D guy when you think about it. His numbers have been a bit erratic this year when it comes to the 3-point line. But even so, he's just, like I was watching the Pacers game, he just disrupts the offense with his presence in the paint. And you can't dispute that from a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. So you got to give it to Miles Turner. Well, at least I got to give it to Miles Turner. And in some ways, I'm also hoping that he can make his way onto the Lakers somehow and lead us to get a bit of a boost in terms of our identity on the defensive end. But it is what it is. We'll just leave it there. So number 1, Draymond Green by a mile. Then we got Caruso. Then we got number 3, which is Miles Turner. Which then now leaves us to finally the Rookie of the Year. Now, just looking at the numbers, watching some games, and honestly, I'll probably start watching more of this guy's team games. It's Evan Mobley's number 1 for me. I mean, you can't dispute the impact that he's had as a rookie coming onto that team. The Cavaliers just surprised me completely. I did not think they were going to be this good. It's ridiculous. I still can't believe it. Maybe I should be pinching myself, but I can't believe it. And no, I'm not this fan of the Cavaliers waiting for them to make their break after LeBron. No, I couldn't care less about the Cavaliers all in all. But just even so, I can't dispute the fact that they're playing so well. Very much the biggest surprise of this season, and I honestly thought that would be the Chicago Bulls for me. But no, the Cavaliers have surprised me. And Evan Mobley, what he's doing on the court, the presence that he's bringing the team, the numbers he's putting up, all things considered, you can't go past him for Rookie of the Year. I don't see anyone even close in the rookie ranks this year who comes close to the impact that Evan Mobley has had on the team. So he's number 1, okay? Number 1. I keep doing this. 2, 4, no, 1. I'll do one hand, 1. So he's number 1. Now, number 2, I honestly, like I said, this was a hard one for me because Rookie of the Year is not something that I'm too well versed, and traditionally I didn't look at it too much unless there was a specific player that I really liked. Like, for example, Ja Morant when it came out, Anthony Edwards, Zion, those kind of players. LaMelo Ball, to an extent, I wasn't a huge fan of his when he came in just because of the narrative behind him, but I have changed that obviously. But I haven't really been the one that looks at all the rookies. I just look at the ones that are standout. So, full disclosure, take some of this with a grain of salt when I'm talking about Rookie of the Year. But number 2, I went with Kade Cunningham. Just in the last few games, he's just showing that impact for the Pistons. Despite their record, just watching him play and the impact that he has for the team, you can't go beyond that. So for number 2, I have to go with Kade Cunningham. He really has started to show his worth, even though he had a very rocky start in terms of, I was watching and I was like, I don't get it. I just don't get it. But then again, for Jalen Green, I didn't get it either. And he's gone now from the team for a little bit and his team goes up. I mean, yeah, Jalen Green to me, just in this initial stage, is a bit overrated, but that's just me. So number 2, I'm going to go with Kade Cunningham. And then number 3, I was juggling between Giddey and Scotty Barnes. I went with Scotty Barnes just because of the record that the Raptors have. I think are better than the OKC right now. And just the numbers he's putting up are just a bit more, I keep using the word impactful, but it is what it is. Impactful. The numbers are just a bit more impactful. And when I've watched Giddey, full disclosure, I've watched Giddey more times because they've played the Lakers 3 times now, whereas I haven't watched Scotty Barnes that much. So full disclosure there. But even then, just watching Giddy on the floor, he made some good plays. He's got some good rookie numbers, I guess. He's got some good presence there with the team. But at the end of the day, I didn't see that impact. He was kind of just there. I was just more focusing on how can we stop Shea. That was just what the reality was. But, no disrespect there. Fellow Aussie to an Aussie. I'm really looking forward to seeing how Giddy grows. I think he's got great potential. And if it wasn't just for the record being so low for OKC, and if he just had a bit more higher numbers, a bit more impact, I would probably give him a higher rating. But just right now, I have to choose between Scotty Barnes and Giddy. I went with Scotty Barnes. Maybe he'll prove me wrong. Okay, who knows? We're only early in the season. It's not even Christmas yet. Okay, could change very well in the year. But that's my number. Okay, that's my ranking for those. So yeah, to recap everything, number 1 for MVP is KD. Number 2 is Steph. Number 3 is Giannis with, like I said, Jokic knocking on that door. And then for Defensive Player of the Year, Draymond Green's right up there. Can't dispute that. Honestly, you just can't. Number 2, I went with Caruso. Interesting pick, but I did it anyway. And number 3, I went with Miles Turner, who I still see year in, year out, not get discussed enough from a defensive player point of view, but he's just making such a great impact for the Pacers. And I'm interested to see where he goes in this move. And then finally, for the Rookies of the Year, Evan Mobley, number 1. No ifs and buts. Separation is really high there for me. Kade Cunningham comes out number 2 with his recent play, and number 3, have to choose someone, Scotty Barnes. Okay, so that's there. That's my predictions just right now in this point in time. I'll do these relatively, I wouldn't say regularly. I'll do it a couple more times probably during the season until the final one. So look out for more of these and see how it changes. But that's my rankings. That's my kind of awards being presented, if it was now, whatever you want to call it. And then we'll see how it goes, okay? So a bit of a different video. I'll be back with the recap sometime this week as well, with recapping the rest of the league and seeing what's happening. But I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And yeah, until then, see you on the court.